Let us go then, you and I, when the 11-day empire eats the sky, like a humanoid melting clams upon the breakfast table, is the quote that begins the SCP-3999 article. It is a rephrasing of the line, "Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table," from the 1915 poem The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. I never was a fan of poetry, but despite that, there's something deeply connected between these two things, both the SCP article and the poem, that touched me. First, let me tell you a story of a boy named Lewis. Lewis was the oldest sibling in a group of 3 children. He always cared for his family, spending time with them, and was generally hailed as a kind and caring person. One day, his younger brother disappeared, something of which Lewis would only ever be able to blame himself for happening. Locking himself inside his room, eventually, substance abuse got to the better of him, and he fell into a world of using marijuana and alcohol until his mother got him a job at a cannery. Some of you may recognise who this character is already, and if you have not played What Remains of Edith Finch, I highly recommend you do, as I'm going to spoil the most impactful part of that game's entire story. And even if you don't play it, I truly recommend simply watching that portion of the game so that you understand the true emotion it evokes. After getting a job at the cannery, he also sought help for his addictions. Now sobered, he started to realise the tedium and monotony of his life and began to create a new one. In one world, he put fish under a blade, the blade would chop and he'd move on to the next. But in the other, he dreamt of greater things, a journey through forgotten lands, a world unexplored where he becomes the new ruler under the fellowship of a beautiful princess, a land where he is worshipped and loved by all the people around him, his dreams getting bigger by the day, taking more and more of his time, more and more of his mind, dragging him deeper and deeper into a world where things are good for him, and he snaps back to reality.
It was hard to argue with him. We began to forget the world we know. I think it pained him to remember Lewis, the cannery worker. He began to despise the man with a royal contempt. I still thought I could save him. Even after he said he was being crowned king over all the lands of wonder. The palace would be packed with his companions. Including the wise Calico who'd insisted on inviting him. His queen waited, holding his crown. There was only one thing left to do. Bend down his head. And the rest I think you know. Mrs. Finch, your son was a kind man who will be missed by all of us who knew him.
Lewis's story is considered by many to be the most relatable and most painful to experience. It's like watching a person drown but you can't swim. The slow, stressful intensity of watching someone struggle for their life, knowing that you can't do anything, yet you don't have the willpower to stop looking and move on either. You're just left there, staring as you see someone slowly die, and and you are nothing but helpless to stop it. If only he had taken a different path in life. If only he had stopped living in his head. Reality is often disappointing, and some people simply cannot bear the weight of it on their shoulders anymore, even if nothing in reality is wrong. And that's what the SCP and the poem share. That feeling of helplessness against the stress of living, that battle with your own brain to find the motivation to do anything, be anything else than you already are. But no matter what, there is nothing to muster, no courage, no willpower. You are trying to summon something that simply doesn't exist from the person that is you. Whilst less brutal than the 3999 SCP, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock explores the story of a man presumably in love with a woman, yet no matter how hard he tries, he cannot find a means to express it. It is a story about self-loathing, indecision and inaction disguised as a love poem. He constantly reaches a point of almost coming to terms about his feelings to her, until he stifles back into a state of insecurity. Inevitably, he turns old, only tempted by the sounds of mermaids singing each to each, portraying what is really now women he can no longer obtain. Old and dishevelled, reduced to a cocoon by his own disability to make choices, he asks, "Do I dare eat a peach?" Controlled by his mind, no longer with the confidence to do anything. SCP-3999, titled "I am at the centre of everything that happens to me," tells a similar story, that of a researcher named Talaran, and an anomaly identified as SCP-3999, which tortures him endlessly. The article is honestly a spewed mess of redacteds and crossed out sections to the point the story is basically incomprehensible. So, what is it truly about? As far as I'm aware, Talaran is meant to represent the person who originally wrote the SCP, and the anomaly itself is representative of his own doubts. The SCP does disgusting things. He kills members of Talaran's family, puts him through unbelievable amounts of torture and pain, yet he also revives and takes Talaran's sister out for ice cream after killing and having non-consensual intercourse with her. The whole point is that it isn't evil, it is just a representation of his inability. The writer, Lord Stonefish's inability. The unhealthy addiction that the writer had to the community, to the point that he became neglectful of himself. He no longer felt like he could write something he was proud of. The pressure of the world was on his shoulders, as if he had to perform. And whilst the piece wasn't his swan song, it was intended to be that way. And I think it's a perfect example of how sometimes you simply cannot overcome yourself. Some fights are unwinnable. Some people will just never have the strength to overpower their own mind. At the bottom of SCP-3999's containment chamber, the corpse of Level 3 researcher James Talaran was found. Researcher Talaran had disappeared almost directly following reassignment to Site-118. A Foundation-assigned cell phone was found on his body, containing only a piece of text resembling a containment procedure for 3999, but with many stylistic deviations and nonsensical procedures, as well as redacted information concerning the nature of the Foundation. From it has been determined that researcher Talaran was assigned to SCP-3999. 3999 had significantly reality warping properties. It breached containment at some point and caused either a CK-class reality restructuring event or a ZK-class end-of-reality event, and it was successfully terminated by researcher Talaran at the cost of his own life. This is how I feel, and I don't doubt this is how many others feel. By no means do I have a bad life. I often think people envy it, and it makes me wish I could give it to the other people, rather than me continue to waste it, as I know the effort to be something more will never come to fruition. The problem isn't the world around me, the problem isn't the environment I live in, the problem is me. If it was anyone else, maybe something better would have come from this person I call myself, but I am my own worst enemy. I am the reason nothing ever comes from me, and the reason nothing ever will. I don't know how to swim, and I'll never know how to swim. The ability was never there, and the ability will never be there, and now all I'm left with is to watch myself drown.